All right, crew, Adrian here. This brute shoot, we're gonna talk about pec tears. That darn Dave Castro, right? All you guys are out there blaming him for a terribly programmed regional. You guys are also probably the ones salty that there's no barbells involved because you're not fit enough to make it to the next phase without heavy weight. Boo-hoo, right? I'm not throwing salt on the wounds of you guys that have torn pecs out there. Heck, I have a torn pec myself, and this happened to me in 2014 when the pec, or the ring dips, I'm sorry, not the pec dips. We could call them pec dips if you'd like, because clearly they're accumulating a lot of victims, but the ring dips appeared in the middle of a chipper, right? I was doing a back and forth workout with Tommy Hackenbrook in one of our final days of preparation. We were doing 5s at a time, but they were quick, explosive ones. Not a lot like the kind in the workout, because they weren't that fast and explosive in the backside of the 50 as you were coming back through that ladder. And I just felt a pull, and it actually led to me withdrawing from that regional. It hurt me tremendously. I can understand what you guys that have experienced these tears are going through. As a spectator, I know it's something that's hard to kind of relate to, but imagine just anything that you've worked for your entire life. A lot of these guys have been kind of building and building and building to this moment, their opportunity to qualify for the CrossFit Games, and an injury like this happens. I'm gonna tell you what you can't do though. You can't just keep blaming the programming. You can't blame the ring dip. Don't try to even say that these guys are on steroids and that's why it's happening, because again, that's only for you guys that physically will never be capable of the things that they're capable of that are actually out there throwing salt in their wounds like that. Don't be that guy. Don't be that girl. Now, one thing that we can look back to is how are we training as a community, right? One, the dumbbell was kind of devastating to everybody, right? And the lack of barbells. Well, maybe we should be training with more odd objects. One. Two, I want you to think about the planes of movement that we train in. Clearly, we're doing a lot of up and down action. I know as a football player, I bench pressed all my entire life, and when I started CrossFit, I really just immediately cut it out almost because it was never present in my eyes enough to train it. What I didn't have a full understanding was how that would influence my body, the way that I recover, and the way that I move, and even the way that it influences my overhead strength and stability as a training movement. Now, I'm not saying that everyone needs to just immediately go out and start bench pressing. That's going to be our answer to a more controlled number of pec tears in our sport, because I think there's more to it than even that. But I would argue that, one, we think that maybe training a ring muscle up is a great place to train a ring dip. And unless you're locking out a muscle up and then going into a series of controlled dips or a series of kipping dips, you know, as well as I know, the range of movement is specifically different, right? When you're really focused on getting your shoulder below the top of your elbow and locking it out at the top, it feels tremendously different than just catching the rings wherever your momentum stops and locking it out. So one could be a lack of training range of motion. Not the range of motion for the standard, because that's never changed, but the range of motion at which you train that joint, maybe we need to do a better job at. Another thing to consider is, and I can tell you right now, I had no exposure to this until I met Nick Sorrell, and he started to develop our linear gymnastics progressions that we include for our brute athletes, but spending time in the bottom of a dip, like the deepest, darkest position that you can find in that dip, holding it there for time, for minutes, for accumulated sets, right? Not only do you need to develop the static strength there, but also dynamic. So we find the bottom position in the ring dip and we swing. And we find a way to push the rings away from our body as our feet and hips are dynamic underneath, right? This is at least going to expose that pec major to the range of motion and the tension that it's under when you guys start to kip and cycle ring dips. Another thing to consider is when these athletes are doing it and how they're doing it under tension, right? Like think about this at a regional level. You have a workout where the fast athletes are literally under 3 minutes and 30 seconds, right? This speed is tremendously an influence on the way that they're executing the workout. Now, who's doing it faster, men or women, right? Generally, the movement is taking place 1 rep at a time, tremendously more explosive on the side of the men. How many women have torn their pecs? I think 0. Right? Unless you guys want to chime in and comment below and let me know something else, I'm aware of 0 women and probably at least 23 to 27 men who have torn their pecs either in preparation and practice of this workout or during the regional themselves. I would argue that if the stimulus was a touch different in how they executed the movement for rep by rep, right? Less explosively, less powerful in order to find that lockout position, that these tears wouldn't have happened. Now, again, does that blame the workout? Absolutely not. It doesn't blame the workout. What it blames is the training that they use to ramp into that particular stimulus, right? So it could have been, like I mentioned, the lack of range. It could have been the lack of exposure to that bottom deep position, and literally just lack of a stimulus of fast cycle rate for the ring dip. My purpose of wanting to make this brute shoot is to educate you guys that it's not about the steroids, it's not about the programming, and it's surely not about the ring dip, right? None of those things can be inherently bad. We make them bad as bad coaches, bad athletes, and ultimately bad movers. I want you guys to think about varying your training so that you feel like no matter what comes out of that hopper, that you're safe and efficient in both of those ways. Sometimes that means some of you guys need to slow down your training a little bit, make it a little bit smarter and a little less on the harder side so that you're bulletproofing your body. I use the term bulletproof, and this only segues me to my next point. Our guy Nick Fowler and then also Sean Pastuch are going to be doing a live webcast specifically in nitty-gritty details about the pec major, the shoulder setup, why these injuries are happening, and maybe what we can do as a community, as a specific athlete, as gyms across the world to help make this something that is a forgotten injury when it comes to the ring dip. So what I want you guys to do, take a look at your training. Is it always the right thing, or is it always the thing that you just see coming up repetitively in the games and you're just mimicking what you see, right? Think about the well-rounded approach that CrossFit's supposed to be preparing you for. If you got true GPP, that includes not only being able to work out well for time, but keeping your body safe as well. And then check out the live cast. It's going to be probably launching Monday sometime, and we'll have the details below this brute shoot so you guys can chime in and definitely catch that live and get all the information that you want that bypasses what I've shared with you today.